And welcome back to In Our Generation, December 30th of 2020. I just got back from my trip to Mexico where I do a Bible school for a week. It's 10 hours a day, 10 to 12 hours a day of Bible reading and Bible teaching. And the people who attend are real troopers that they sit there and for that long and listen to people like me. They definitely deserve a crown in heaven. And then on top of that, it was like 38 degrees in the conference room, if you want to call it that. It's a huge metal building built into the side of a mountain in the highest city in Mexico, called Mineral del Monte, also called Real del Monte. And that's where we have done the school for the last few years. This time we did it with a very reduced group of people partly because of COVID, but also because we wanted to try some new exercises, such as teaching them how to read the Bible more dramatically, you might want to call it, more interestingly, putting more emphasis and importance on the text. And so that's what we did this year, a lot of that. And my hat's off to them for sitting there on hard chairs for hours on end in 38-degree cold weather with no heat and no way to heat this huge building. And so I'm very impressed with people who are willing to do that. But we had a good-sized group. A couple people who had signed up didn't make it, which was too bad. But we did have a decent amount of people there, just the right amount, I think, for the reading exercises we were doing. It would have been hard to do with more. But we'll get back to Mexico in a minute. A whole lot of news happened while I was gone, which we won't cover just because it's old news. However, one thing that I found very interesting recently is Bill Gates, the billionaire, Microsoft founder, longtime CEO, has a new plan in which he is working with others to try to dim the sun. Not by dim sum, dim the sun, as in dim the enormous ball of fire that warms and lights the earth. This is in an attempt to cool the planet. So he has signed up with an idea that they have that they're going to spray particles into the atmosphere, which will reflect some of the sunlight and cool the planet. And they are going to combat global warming by dimming the sun. Now, first, kudos to them for acknowledging that the sun is the largest source of heat here. And as long as the sun is hot, the planet will heat. What's interesting about this is that the eco-warriors are up in arms against Bill Gates. This is not a plan that they believe is good. In fact, they think it will harm the planet. Not because of unintended consequences, which all the do-gooders tend to forget, that there are always unintended consequences to everything. And if you spray a bunch of particles into the atmosphere with the hope of dimming the sun, well, things that we can't foresee will probably happen because there are always unintended consequences. But that's not why they are upset. They're upset because they're afraid that if he manages to dim the sun, which is as ambitious of a plan as I've ever heard, I don't think you could be more ambitious than that. So if they manage to dim the sun, they're afraid that people will then conclude that we don't need to lower carbon emissions. Which, yeah, exactly. If we can dim the sun and cool the planet by doing that, then yeah, probably people will conclude that we don't need to lower carbon emissions, which means that we can be full steam ahead in the market economy of the world. Capitalism can proceed unimpeded if we were able to dim the sun and satisfy everybody. If the planet were to cool because of Gates's dim the sun plan, then we would no longer need to pass regulations about carbon emissions. We could emit carbon all we wanted, and we would just continue to dim the sun as needed. We could put a little dimmer switch on it, and we could just turn it down. If we want the planet cooler, we're talking about air conditioning the planet. Sounds wonderful. I like air conditioning. But they're very concerned because a great deal of these eco-warriors, their primary objective is not to cool the planet. It is to control carbon emissions, which is code for controlling production. Which, if that sounds a lot like Marxism to you, then you might be surprised to find out that most eco-warriors are Marxist in their worldview. Now, they say one has nothing to do with the other. Perhaps that's true. It always seems odd to me, though, that their plans always line up along Marxist ideological lines. But I thought that was very interesting that Bill Gates has a plan. He actually has a patent, for those that don't know, or maybe don't remember, he has a patent for stopping hurricanes. His goal was to put large ships in the ocean that would have turbines that would regurgitate or would stir up the ocean water and bring cold water to the surface, and thereby diminishing the power of hurricanes. So he would put a bunch of these huge ships that they were to build out in front of a hurricane, and it would be and use these turbines to pull up the cold water up from the bottom of the ocean, cool off the surface, and take away the energy source from hurricanes. So he's definitely a terraformer in mentality. He has big ideas. We'll see how this one plays out. Let's see here. What else is there? Yes, so we have a whole lot of politicians and scientists coming out on social media and on the news proclaiming that we need leaders who are going to do something. Now, most of you probably know that I'm against politicians who do something. I purposefully want to elect politicians who commit themselves to do nothing. I think doing nothing is the best thing anyone can do if you're a politician. I think we should have an award for politicians who do the least. Because everything politicians do, one, costs obscene amounts of money, right? Obscene. I read a funny joke online on social media this week that says that politicians can perform the miracle of feeding 5 with 5,000 loaves, which I thought was pretty funny because that's pretty accurate. Politicians the only person who spends $100 on a $5 hamburger. And so everything politicians do costs something. Even when they do nothing, it costs something. It just costs less. We would probably have only a $16 trillion debt if our politicians abstained from doing anything always. We would still be in debt up to our eyeballs, most likely. It's them doing something that is so expensive. So one, I don't want politicians to do anything because of the expense that it entails when politicians do something. But also, every time you do something, you also create unintended consequences. And what better example is there of the value, the power of doing nothing than how fast vaccines were developed? Now, I'm not suggesting that private enterprise and research labs do nothing. I think they should do everything their budget allows, provided their budget does not come from the federal government. But when we look at the vaccine and how fast it was developed, it was because politicians stopped doing things. Regulators started doing nothing and allowed the vaccine companies, the biomed companies to proceed at full speed because they were unimpeded by regulators and politicians worrying that they would be seen as doing nothing. So if you want to know what our society would look like if politicians did nothing, then just look at how fast vaccines were developed. So we definitely need more nothing. We need, just like Seinfeld was the show about nothing, we need a politician whose platform is about nothing. His goal is to do nothing. And I would definitely vote. I don't care what party he was from. If he would promise to do nothing about the economy, do nothing about education, do nothing about COVID, do nothing about abortion, just do nothing. And we'll figure the rest out. I would vote for that politician. That would be my dream candidate. So if you guys come across anybody who is promising to do nothing, please send me his info so I can promote the one politician in the world who chooses to do nothing. Speaking of doing nothing or less than nothing, Prince Charles is warning. Prince Charles is the Prince of the UK, New England, for those of you who don't know who that is. Prince Charles is warning of the human exploitation of nature. So apparently humans are exploiting not only their fellow man, but now they're exploiting nature itself. Well, yeah, that's what humans do. That is the essence, and in some senses, the definition of being human, is that we have the capacity to exploit, to use the resources that surround us. We have the capacity to dig very deep pits and extract from, quote unquote, Mother Earth everything that we need and want. And that is exploitation of nature. And according to these people like Prince Charles, nature is now objecting to its exploitation, and it is fighting back against us. What is Prince Charles's solution? His solution is that we should return to the ways of life of the indigenous peoples of the New World, particularly those of Canada. I'm not sure why he wants to return to the ways of the Canadian indigenous peoples. Maybe it's because he's read up a little bit about most other indigenous peoples and their culture and way of life. For instance, I grew up in Mexico, the land of the Aztecs. Many Mexican citizens would love to return to the ways of the Aztecs. The Aztecs, when the Spaniards met them, had this delightful, delicious, delightful ritual soup that they consumed called pozole. Pozole was made from the thigh muscles of their human sacrifice victims. After they sacrificed them by removing their heart while they were still living, they would carve them up into pieces and take the thigh muscles, and they would make a soup called menudo. It's still eaten in Mexico. Granted, it's no longer made with human thigh muscles, at least we hope not. It's made with pork. And the Aztecs, when the Spaniards convinced them to forsake their pagan ways and their cannibalistic rituals, the Spaniards substituted pork for human thigh muscles, and the Aztecs said, tastes the same to me. And they were happy with that. So, again, another evidence of our kinship to pigs. So no, I do not want to return to the way of the indigenous peoples. I do not want to live in a teepee. I do not want my wife hauling firewood while I sleep in a hammock. Well, wait. Maybe Prince Charles is on to something. Maybe he is definitely on to it. I hadn't thought about it. I have to rethink this whole thing. No, I do not want to return to the way of any indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples did not have a life that any of us want. That is why we're building houses, which are carved from the ground, which are made from materials that are cut and mined and plundered from earth. And you can call it exploitation, but there's another word for it, an older word that we've been using for a long time, and it's called civilization. And it's awful funny when somebody who lives in several enormous palaces served by guards and butlers and waitresses and waiters and servants, I doubt he even puts his own shoes on in the morning and ties them, is telling us that we should return to the ways of the indigenous peoples. It seems to me that the royal family of Britain should lead the way. Definitely should lead the way, and they should go live out on a hillside somewhere in a teepee by themselves, and they should eat beetles and berries and whatever it is they can find and hope they can gather enough to keep them through the winter. It's always these rich people who want to tell us how we need to live poor while they continue unabated in their wealth, in their wealthy living. I told you I was in Mexico. We were doing the school, like I said, the Bible school that I do every year. I find it interesting that Mexican believers, Christians, are willing to go to a school like that and sit there. These are not seminary students. These are just normal people who have normal jobs and normal families and normal lives. And they go there and they'll sit there for that long. And I often think that I probably could not get not 5 or 6 people in the U.S. to be willing to do that for a week, to take off a week of work, to sit there for 10 to 12 hours a day for 5 days and hear in-depth teaching on the truths and facts of the scriptures. I don't think I could get Americans to do that, which I find very interesting. Anyways, I was in Mexico. And if you want the epitome of do something society, Mexico is what you should look at. If you want to know why I oppose do something politicians and I support do nothing politicians and I want a do nothing party, all you have to do is go to Mexico and see how they handle everything and what a do nothing mentality has resulted in Mexico. When I was there, they had just reinstated, or when I was leaving, I should say, they had just reinstated their lockdown measures as a COVID-19 protocol. And one of their big ideas in Mexico, and this is big ideas, brilliant ideas. I don't know who came up with this. Some politician had run out of things to do, and he came up with an idea of how to do something better. So their idea was to combat COVID, to keep COVID from spreading. They don't allow you to drive your car every other day. So if your license plate ends if the last numeral on your license plate is an even number, then you can't drive your car on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And if your car ends on an odd number, then you can't drive on the other days. So this is their brilliant idea. Don't let people drive anywhere in their car with the windows rolled up, contained in their own virus-infected breathing and farts. Don't let them do that. So what do people do? Do you think they stay home? Do you think they don't go to work? Do you think they don't go to the store? Do you think they don't go out? Of course they do. They crowd into the city buses. On those days when they do lockdown, the city buses are more packed than ever before. This is the brilliant idea of Mexican politicians committed to doing something. If you want to know why I hate do something politicians, all you have to do is look at Mexico. They are committed to stopping COVID by packing everybody into city buses. Brilliant. Not only did they do that, that wasn't enough. Politicians, they never have done enough. They must always do more. So Mexican politicians have decided that what they need to do is shut down all stores, all grocery stores, all corner stores, all convenience stores, any kind of store. Shut it down at 6 p.m. so that you can have a greater density of people in the grocery store from 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning when they open till 6 p.m. Since you can't go after 6, everybody crowds in a less amount of time. Rather than telling grocery stores they must stay open 24 hours a day and taking their silly alternate day no driving rule and applying it to in a meaningful way where you could say if your license plate ends on an even number, you can go to the grocery store every other day. You can go to the other stores, to the home improvement store on the opposite days, and spread it out so you are spreading out when people are in these stores. But no, let's crowd them into city buses so they can pack into the grocery stores all together and then hurry them home to infect their families. And they put the police out on the roads and the entrance of every city enforcing these ridiculous rules. Never mind that the murder rate in Mexico is astronomically high. Never mind that thievery, breaking and entering, rape, robbery, and all other forms of violent crimes and nonviolent crimes are astronomically high in Mexico. What we're going to have the police do is police the entrances to the towns and make sure that they're not getting somebody driving into town with, heaven forbid, a license plate that ends in 1. Also, they want to make sure you're wearing your mask even if you're all alone in your car. Even if you're all alone in your car, you want to make sure you're wearing your mask. My grandson's coming in. I need to put a lock on the door. And so Why do they care if you're wearing your mask inside your... Hold on a second. I'm attending to my grandson. Go on. Go on. Grandkids. Grandma's not taking care of them like she's supposed to. So why do they care whether or not whether or not the mask is on? If you're in your car all by yourself, who knows? So what does everyone do when they're driving up to the roadblock? Well, they put their mask on, drive through the roadblock, and take it off. Don't you think that these policemen's time would be much better served trying to stem the astronomical crime rate in Mexico? In every city in Mexico, astronomical crime rate. Don't you think that they would be much better off, their time much better used stopping the crime? I think so. Speaking of Mexico, they are set to become the world's largest legal cannabis marijuana market. The Mexican Senate has already passed a law making recreational marijuana in small quantities legal. The lower house of Congress in Mexico is supposedly going to approve that law in February with an amendation allowing greater amounts. Right now, I think it is 1 gram that you can have and not be arrested by the police, and they want to increase that. So somehow they think this is going to lower the murder rate in Mexico. I hope it does. If people in Mexico that I know and love were safer because marijuana was legal, then I would be very happy about that. While Mexico is legalizing marijuana and becoming the largest legal market for marijuana in the world, the UK is banning junk food ads, promotions, and giveaways. It is going to be illegal for any store to give you any type of a promotion that is about a food that the UK government has determined is bad for you. So if the store used to say buy one get one free on Skittles or on Snicker bars, they can no longer do that. I don't know if British people eat Skittles and Snicker bars, but whatever it is British people eat that make their teeth so bad, the UK government is banning any promotions. So you must pay full price for all your junk food. They cannot do any giveaways, and that includes free refills on sugary drinks. So no more free soda refills. No more free sweet tea refills, I guess. No more orange juice refills. I mean, all of these things have comparable levels of sugar in them. And their reasoning, they say, in Reason Magazine, where this was reported, they say, quote, families want to be presented with healthier choices. I don't think they do. I don't think anybody's making families buy 49 bags of Skittles. I think they want to buy those. The idea that people don't want to buy them, but they are being somehow manipulated into buying them because they're cheap. Well, that's a society that we're going to now, where the government is going to decide what you should buy, what you shouldn't buy, and they're simply going to tax the things they don't like out of existence. Now, if you don't like Skittles, or you don't like cigarettes, or you don't like alcohol, then you may like that those things are taxed out of existence. But what happens when they start taxing things out of existence that you do like? This is an old argument, and certainly kind of cliche, but I thought it was interesting that they are now going to tax these things and going to control them. And yet, at the same time, recreational drugs are more and more accepted. They say that marijuana has no adverse effects. There are plenty of studies that would contradict that claim, would certainly put that claim to the test. Maybe they're not conclusive yet either way, but I have a hard time believing that what is the worst thing for you is eating 2 bags of Skittles instead of 1, and yet smoking marijuana to your heart's content or drinking alcohol is of no consequence whatsoever. Remember that for a long time, people thought cigarettes were good for your health. In fact, Charles Spurgeon recommended the smoking of cigarettes for your health at times. And so right now they're saying that marijuana is not bad for your health. Well, we'll see. It's too early to tell. And when we find out that it wasn't good for your health and that it actually had enormous health effects and people are dying from diseases that we find are related to marijuana, and we find that the marijuana producers and distributors and sellers all manipulated the data and manipulated the propaganda and manipulated the product the way the cigarette companies did, all of those things, in order to get people to buy their product, we'll find out that it's too late. All right. What else is in the news? One thing that's in the news was when I left, and this may have already dropped out of the news, but it's still football season, so let's talk about this for a second. Sean Payton of the New Orleans Saints, the quarterback for the, I'm sorry, not the quarterback, the coach for the New Orleans Saints. We want to award him the mainstream media award for unparalleled courage. There is a article that reported on Yahoo.com and their lifestyle section, where Sean Payton, the coach of the New Orleans Saints, stood up and issued one of the most brave, one of the most courageous statements I've ever heard. He says that he doesn't care who doesn't like it. He stands against racism. Oh my goodness. To think that somebody that is such a public figure, that is so well known, that has so much writing on what he has to say, he could lose his job, he could lose his endorsement deals, he could lose all his friends and all his importance, and for somebody like that to come out with such courage, such bravery, and say that he opposes racism. Wow. That's probably the most courageous thing I've heard anyone say in the entire year. That's right up there with those people that say they want to end COVID. That's bravery. That is true bravery. And the mainstream media is definitely trumpeting his courage and his bravery, his unparalleled courage. I would assume there's no other coach in the NFL willing to say such a courageous thing. And so imagine what would happen if all major league sports were to stand, or what if they were to take a knee against racism? That's what we should start a campaign and I got an idea. Let's get a quarterback who's willing to start a whole movement of taking a knee against racism. Imagine what our world would look like. Imagine what that would be. We need more people with this kind of courage. One of the things he's talking about with his courageous statement is how there are so few people of color, such a terribly cliche phrase, I can't stand it, but people of color in the coaching staffs and the front office staff of the NFL and other professional sports leagues. Of course, that we went and looked at his staff, and they're certainly underrepresented even on his staff. You wonder why he hasn't hired more of them. Of course, he is now committing to that, and he doesn't care. If anybody gets mad about it, he is going to hire people of color. I just wonder why people like that don't resign and insist. I mean, Sean Payton, I'm sure, is quite important in the organization. I'm sure his word carries a great deal of weight. You would think he could resign and insist that his role be filled by somebody of color, preferably a transgender woman of color would probably be the proper choice, the correct choice to get them to the Super Bowl. That is why they haven't won lately. They need a transgender woman of color to get them there. And Sean Payton could do that. I mean, it's not like he's just started out. It's not like he has a whole career ahead of him. He's the second longest tenured coach in the NFL. I'm sure it's about time for somebody with that kind of white privilege, old man white privilege, to resign and for him to insist that his place be filled with somebody with unique football skills as being a person of color, as being a woman, as being transgender, and any other woke boxes that can be checked. These are what we need to get winning football teams. This is why the Saints are not winning as they could be winning if they had the right coach. Okay. When I was leaving, I found a piece of news, and some of you have seen this, where a family was not only removed from a United Airlines flight, but banned for life. Banned for life. And for doing what? Because their 2-year-old refused to wear a mask. And the airline said that if they could not get their 2-year-old to comply, that they would be removed. And when they resisted, or maybe they didn't resist, but when they objected, I should say, then United Airlines banned them for life. Now, I've flown United. And it's like that old joke of the preacher. One of his congregants comes to him and says, "Preacher, I think my wife is trying to poison me." And the preacher says, "Well, let me go talk to her and try to get to the bottom of this, and I'll let you know." When he comes back, he tells the man, "I spoke for a long time with your wife, and if I were you, I would drink the poison." If I were them, I would thank United for banning me. I've flown United. However, as ridiculous as it may be for an airline to ban somebody over their 2-year-old not wearing a mask, you have to wonder about any parent who has a child who's 2 years old who refuses to wear a mask. I was 2 once. I can't imagine ever refusing to do what I was told. That would not have gone well for me. It would have not gone well for me there in the plane. It would not have gone well for me back in the laboratory of the plane. It would not have gone well for me as I got off the plane. It would not have gone well for me when I got home after flying on the plane. Anyone who has a 2-year-old who refuses, they need to be banned from more than United. They need to be banned from parenting. I understand a tiny baby who you can't reason with, who is difficult to understand what's going on. But a 2-year-old who can refuse to wear a mask can be trained to wear a mask. Why weren't these parents teaching their 2-year-old how to obey at home? I'm not suggesting that the 2-year-old be disciplined on the spot, although in a time long gone by, that would have been welcomed and applauded by the entire plane had mama taken off her chancla and given little 2-year-old a little spanking on the butt and told her to put her mask on so the plane could get underway. The whole crowd would have cheered. Nowadays, they would have banned them and put them in prison. What I am saying is that if you're a parent and you have a 2-year-old and you're planning on flying, don't you think it would be wise for a week to train the child to wear a mask and not object? I think that would be wise. All right, and that is the news for today. It is good to be back. I will try to get back to doing these more often for the 2 of you who listen and enjoy them. That's probably an overstatement. For the 2 of you who occasionally listen and seldomly enjoy them, I'll try to do them more. And that is all for me. You guys have a great